Now, page 4, why there will never be post-corona life in America. You see, this is the farce about this entire episode of the government overreaction to the Wuhan coronavirus. We will never defeat the virus. Coronaviruses have been with us for decades, and unless there's some kind of scientific breakthrough in the future, the coronaviruses will outlive all of us. Odds are we will never defeat it, never control it. All human beings can do is attempt to mitigate the spread of any virus. Therefore, for these blue state governors to come out and say, we can't reopen our states until they, quote, defeat the Wuhan coronavirus, is ludicrous. It's virtually impossible. Okay, so what do we know to date about the Wuhan coronavirus that allows thinking Americans to affirm what we have since the beginning? That this government response is a complete and total politically motivated draconian over-response to a bug. Let's start with who is affected most. By far, the people who are most vulnerable are the elderly with underlying health conditions like, for example, lung disease. In other words, the young are almost immune to this virus. Yes, young people have come down with the virus. That's a fact. But largely children and young adults are not succumbing to the Wuhan coronavirus. Also, we know this. The mortality rate numbers are worthless. They're absolutely worthless. In its infinite wisdom, the CDC is encouraging doctors to label a death due to corona, even if they are only assuming. What's more, they are declaring a coronavirus death, even if that victim had been suffering from a chronic and lethal prior disease. These folks could have easily died from the seasonal flu. So the death totals from the Wuhan coronavirus are blown way out of proportion and are statistically garbage. And speaking of influenza, the recent antibody testing for COVID-19 has a mortality rate game changer that the blue state governors are simply choosing to ignore. This testing shows that somewhere around 20% of various population samples from both coasts has been exposed to the virus, 20%. What does that mean? Well, it proves that the virus has probably been with us in this country well before the government overreaction. It also proves that the mortality rate is lower than the seasonal flu, even if we use the doctored and inflated death by corona numbers. So, thinking Americans understand all of this. And the president knows this. But he also knows that at some point, this irrational response to a bug will be behind us. However, from a purely political perspective, here's the reality about governors and dealing with the Wuhan coronavirus in the future. If President Trump wins re-election, then the virus is going to be with us a lot longer than if he loses. You catch my drift? This entire government overreaction is led by a bunch of blue state Democrats who hold power over about 1/3 or more of the population of this country. If President Trump loses in November, God forbid, then suddenly the virus won't be much of a problem anymore for President-elect Joe Biden. Lord, forgive me for uttering those words. But I'm attempting to make a point. The government response was, is, and will continue to be driven not by health concerns, but by the radical agenda of a radical political party that is consumed by a win-at-all-cost mentality. And the damage from this government response has been severe, and too much of it, unfortunately, will be permanent, just like the virus, which is here to stay, which is why there will never be a post-corona America. However, these blue state governors continue to mislead their constituents, inferring that the Wuhan coronavirus is more deadly and more dangerous than it actually is.
So uncharted waters doesn't mean proceed blindly, right? It means get information, get data the best you can, and use that data to decide where you're going.
Stop tape. All right, let's do that. So let's look at the data, the sampling that was done for antibodies just in the Big Apple in New York City. It came up with somewhere in the neighborhood of 1 in 5, about 20% of the people in New York City have been exposed to the Wuhan coronavirus. So if you include these people in the denominator and the numerator is the number of dead, Governor, what happens? What happens to the mortality rate if you include the people who have been exposed that we know of? So that 20% number plus the number of confirmed cases, that's the absolute rock bottom number. The number could be even larger than that. So when you use that as a denominator, and the numerator is the number of dead in New York City, what happens then, Governor, to the mortality rate? Why, it drops. It drops precipitously. The problem is this guy and the guy on the other coast and various other governors are not reporting this to the people. Instead, they're saying, hey, you know what? We just can't back off yet. We have to maintain social distancing. We have to maintain the lockdown in your apartment or in your home or in your house. We have to force you to wear a mask when you go outside. Let's talk about the data on masks, by the way, shall we, Governor? The CDC, the very entity, through Dr. Fauci anyway, that's talking about all Americans running around with a mask on for our own good. The CDC did a study in 2018 about transmitting the flu, a virus, wearing a mask or not. And the bottom line is that it does not restrict or mitigate the transmission of a virus by wearing a mask. In other words, forcing people to wear a mask when they go outside is going to do nothing to stop or retard or mitigate the transmission of the Wuhan coronavirus. The CDC knows it, I know it, and probably this governor, the governor in California, the governor in Illinois, the governor in Washington, Oregon, in North Carolina, in Virginia, in Pennsylvania, in Michigan, have I forgotten any? All these blue state governors know this information, but they're not sharing it. Oh, by the way, social distancing, that's a load of malarkey too. There were reports early on, completely ignored, that the virus could be spread by a sneeze or a cough, and it can travel 27 feet in the air. So we're doing the 6-foot separation. It's absolutely worthless if that information is true, but it's harmful to the American people. It's harmful to our psyche, what we're doing to ourselves. Self-imprisoning, house arrest is very, very harmful to a human being. And then forcing people to separate, that's very, very harmful to a human being. And then forcing people to wear a covering over your face so you can't even see if they're smiling or frowning, that is very, very harmful to a human being, but it's more so worse for Americans because we have this crazy thing called the First Amendment. And to me and to millions of other Americans, I'm sure they agree, a mask represents a muzzle on our First Amendment rights. And these are the things that Andrew Cuomo and Gavin Newsom and the rest of them will not share with their constituents in their respective states. So what's going to happen in New York or California or Illinois if Donald Trump wins re-election and in November, December, this Wuhan coronavirus makes a comeback, if you will, or it mutates into a slightly different strain? Answer? Brace yourselves. These blue state governors might try this attack on liberty and the economy all over again.
Want to see more videos like this? Click on the link below and subscribe to One American News on YouTube. And call your cable provider and kindly demand that One American News is added to your lineup. Call and subscribe today.